Well, welcome once again to the Whitehouse Clinic's Book Club. And I think today Justine's going to start us off.
Hello, I am. Now my book is the book The Midnight Library, and it's a book my friend recommended me because I've been a bit lapsed in my reading and I'm trying to get back into it. So she recommended me this book and I did finish it and I did quite enjoy it. I'm not sure I particularly loved it, but I enjoyed it. And it's a story about a young lady, she's 19 years old, her name is Nora Seed. And she was 19 when she decided she wanted to die. She felt,
Wow.
I know, it's a bit, I couldn't believe it when I started reading it, but anyway, bear with me. She had what she thought was a life that was full of regret.
Right.
She thought she was lonely, she thought she was very, very unhappy, and a series of events carried on that eventually ended in the death of her cat, which just put her over the edge.
Wow.
So she decided on that day that she was going to call it a day.
And is this present day set?
Yes. Yes, it is. So she did. She called it a day. She took the tablets, but she found herself in the Midnight Library. And in the Midnight Library was an old librarian who was actually a character that she'd known before and who was very, very kind to her when her father had died. And the library was as long as you could see one way and as long as you could see the other, and it was floor to ceiling in books, and these books kept moving and moving and moving. And Nora found out that each one of these books was a life that she could have led. It's
Wow.
almost like the films Sliding Doors or
Right,
you
yes.
know, Multiverse, the comic book it was Doctor Strange in the multiverse, where there's loads of different lives going on.
Yeah.
So Nora was sort of challenged in that she could find a life that she would be happy in and that she felt was worth living. And these lives had the same characters in them in different guises. They had
Right.
different characters in. She even met one chap who was life jumping the same as her.
Wow.
And the Noras in each life would have a certain deja vu moment. So when Nora left the life that she was
Testing
in,
out.
Yeah.
Or
testing
like that.
out, exactly, she would just have one little thought and she would go back to the library. And Nora, who was in the life, got a sort of deja vu, got a slight sort of, what happened there. She'd lost a few
Right.
minutes.
Yeah.
Nora did find some lives she liked. She found some lives that she didn't like. Anyway, I will leave it to anyone that decides to read the book. Safe to say, it's a happy ending,
Right.
and there's a moral to the story all the way through. So I did like it. I was a bit sort of shocked when I read the first few pages, but
So that happens really early on.
it really happens
Right.
early on, yes. And you think,
Wow.
I couldn't believe it, and I was sort of like, well, I don't know that I want to read this
No.
anymore. But if I persevered with it, because my friend said that it was a good book, and I thought, well, okay. And I got all the way to the end, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the thought that, is there a midnight library for all of us?
Well, it sounds sort of vaguely reminiscent of The Five People That You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom, which, for those of you who haven't read at home, is about a gentleman who dies and then visits five people who are very important in his life, once he's died, and the influence that they have and the morals and lessons that they've taught him and that he takes on board again.
Yes. I mean, what's so fascinating, and obviously we don't want you to give the
No, I
ending,
don't.
the ending away, is whether she has a way back, having
it.
seen what's possible. That's absolutely fascinating.
It is. But I would be at pains to say that although I've brought in quite a not a very nice topic, it is a book worth reading, and it does have a nice ending.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are
it's
not many
depressing.
books which, having listened to it or listening to your take on it, I instantly think I'd really like to read.
Oh, really?
And that really sounds like
Oh,
one.
good.
It just sounds
Yes.
really fascinating because
It
the whole
is.
premise of it sounds really interesting.
Yes, it is interesting, and I like to think that maybe there are midnight libraries for us all that
Yes.
we can have a look at.
Yes. It is absolutely fascinating. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Justine.
Well, that was my book.
They're brilliant. Well, the book I'm going to talk about, haven't actually got with me, is a book which is, I was going to say based on a real story, but it is a true story, and it's called Red Notice. And it is probably one of the most intriguing, gripping, almost thrillers I've ever read, despite the fact it's a true story. Written by an American called Bill Browder, who was a bit of a sort of, I don't know, 1960s, 70s dropout in the American, I think the West Coast. Decided to get into a field which he didn't really know, which was buying stocks and shares. Had a few lucky breaks, had a few total mess ups as well, and then set up a investment fund, which wasn't really doing very much. Got a few tips about the amount of money that was there to be made in Russia with the fall of the Soviet Union. It's astonishing because he must have been either incredibly naive or incredibly brave, because he goes to Russia, sets up this fund, and realizes the astonishing wealth or the value of some of these companies that are being just handed out. Now, of course, most of the people who they're being these sort of shares, if you like, are being handed out to, have no idea of their value, whether it's the huge companies that have become sort of Gazprom, that sort of thing. And what's so fascinating about the book is it explains the rise of the oligarchs, which I've never really known, to be honest. How they bought up from vast swathes of these companies that were being dished out to essentially the peasants, who had no idea, and he'd buy these chunks of companies for very, very little money, and he made a huge amount of money, as did his investors. But, and this is where the naivety comes into it, and it's very easy for us now to look back on it and realise the level of naivety, but he didn't really see the fact that a lot of the normal laws, rights and wrongs that we take for granted in the West just don't exist in Russia. And he crossed some very, very nasty people, where there was huge amounts of money to be made. And it's, in a way, it's that classic American thing that you read in so many books. You can't do this to me, I'm an American citizen, sort of thing. And he was, I think, thrown in jail a couple of times, managed to escape. He built up a team around him. And again, the sort of bravery, come greed, come naivety, all shines through as he tries to take on the Russian establishment for being corrupt, which seems absolutely laughable. It really does. And what sort of humanises the book towards the end, somehow all along he seems to be quite a lovable character, quite self-effacing as he goes along the whole journey. But one of the individuals who's very close to him is his lawyer, a chap called Sergei Magnitsky. When they realise that it's all going horribly, horribly pear-shaped and actually their lives are at risk, he pulls everyone out of Russia. But Magnitsky, for I can't remember the reason, decides no, it's wrong that this is happening, and he wants to stay. That's where his family are and what have you. And well, anyway, he gets dragged off to a gulag and tortured and what have you. And ultimately Magnitsky is murdered by the state. And rather than sort of walking away from it, Bill Browder makes it his lifelong mission to get justice for him, and has been working tirelessly ever since in the United States to achieve that. And even now he's working with the Biden administration to quite understand what drives Putin. And it is such a fascinating insight into the psyche of the Russian state. And even reading the book helps you understand to a degree what drives Putin. So I would recommend it to anyone. It's called Red Notice, and it is just probably the most compelling book I've ever read, to be honest.
How old is Bill Bryden now?
Bill Browder is probably about 67, 68 now, I think. He has written a follow-up, and I can't remember what it's called. But I think he's made plenty enough money. And I don't think he has funds anymore. He really has devoted his life to get justice for Sergei Magnitsky and his family. And it's a very heartwarming book. It's exciting. It's a thriller. It's harrowing, but it's very exciting. And with all of these things, what really makes it is that you know it's actually a true story. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't believe it.
Do you think he's on a list somewhere?
Oh, I'm sure he is. Absolutely, and he knows he is.
Yeah.
And he's very, very careful where he goes outside the United States. And it's utterly fascinating. Really is. So yes, Red Notice. That's my book. Liv, tell us about yours.
Okay, so I've brought along Leave the World Behind, which I have to be honest with you, I've dipped in and out of over the last couple of months. I don't know whether perhaps it's the vocabulary that Rumaan Alam has chosen to use, or whether it's just one of those books that sort of requires a bit more perseverance.
Now, I don't know the author at all.
No, neither have I. Neither have I. He's not an author that I'd come across before, but he's now getting quite a bit of attention because Netflix have bought the rights to the book to turn it into a Netflix original series, which rumour has it is going to star Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington. So it's quite, there's quite a lot of excitement surrounding the book and where it's going to go and how they're going to adapt it into a series.
This book, Liv, the one that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, brief summary, it's about two families. We'll start with the first family. So first family, white American family, male father. Let me try that again. So you've got two families, one white family and black family. The white family consists of mother, father, daughter, son, and the black family a little bit older, sort of heading towards sort of late middle age to sort of early elderly kind of vibe. And the family of four decide that they want to go on a holiday. They want to escape out of the city, and it's sort of based around New York kind of area. They want to escape the city, go into the country, and have a really lovely week or so away as a family, spend some real quality time together. And so they go for an Airbnb, which I'm sure lots of you will know. You go online, you pick somewhere, and you go and move in for a certain amount of time. The family who own the house are the elderly people that live in this house, and they go away. They go to the city. They sort of do a kind of swap, as it were. Anyway, while they're away, they can sort of completely cut off. It's one of these, they view it kind of as a retreat. And so they're not really looking at mobile phones or computers or anything. But one evening, they're all relaxed and there's a knock at the door, and it's the elderly couple have turned up, and they've said, look, there's been a complete power outage in the city. Wi-Fi's not working, landline's down, everything's just stopped working, and we're really frightened, we're in panic, and we want to come home. And so, the family of four are kind of a bit like, we're on holiday here. Why have you turned up? This isn't really what we've agreed for. This isn't what we've paid for. And they said, oh, please, we'll come and stay. We'll completely stay out of your way. We'll stay downstairs. We'll stay away from you. And of course, with no mobile phone signal or, Wi-Fi connection or any sort of connection to the outside world, because they really are in the middle of nowhere in this place, they have no means to verify that this story is true. So the first part of the book once everyone's been introduced, is kind of gauging, do we believe these
Right,
people?
I see, yes.
They've turned up, they've rented their house on Airbnb, and now they've turned up in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm, to say everything's stopped working, we need to come home. So that's the first part.
All sounds a bit like
Good
slasher,
job.
slasher stuff, Axeman stuff. That does.
But then stuff starts happening. So the Wi-Fi's not working, the water's not working, they're filling up baths with water.
Oh, even in the country.
Yeah, the animals are acting a little bit strange. And I won't give too much away, but you know, I think I would like to see what Netflix do with it, really, because Jill's read the book, I've read the book, and we're finding, I don't know, I found it's not the way to sell it, but I found the ending a little bit of a letdown, perhaps, and I would be eager to see what they do with it in terms of Netflix, because they must find a way to spin it.
I don't know. It
else.
sounds ripe for Netflix.
It's
There's so
very
many Netflix series. By the time you're on season 5, you think you lot don't know how this finishes, do you?
It's super suspenseful. That is one thing that I will say. But the only thing that kind of for me that detracted away from that is the vocabulary that the author's chosen to use. It all just sort of feels a bit. And we see it a lot with modern authors. They leap in with all of this extravagant wordplay and tons and tons and tons of description and things that don't really need a description, that would have really just been, you know, as simple as calling a spade a spade. That would have been just as effective. Yeah. It's, you know...
That's quite lazy writing, actually, isn't it?
It's just, yeah, it was a bit... It didn't need it. The plot line was so good that it didn't need that. It didn't need that, but I still think it's well worth the read, and I think if you're somebody who enjoys watching Netflix series, it might be something that perhaps you might want to read before you watch the series.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. How interesting. Those are both some really fascinating books.
Yeah.
Because I can't work out at all how that
No.
where that's going.
It does sound a bit sinister in the beginning,
and
though.
with your books, I sort of I've got ideas as to where it might be going.
Yes, they're probably correct ideas, Duncan.
So wow, so 3 very, very different books.
Yes.
Yeah, exciting. Right, well, thank you everyone
Thank you.
very much indeed. And until next time, thank you.